The fights were brutal, the cries of the deafening crowd, but Joe Corvino's eyes remained fixed, cold, calculating. He was not just a dog creator, he was an alchemist of brutality, an artisan who turned brute strength into art. Dogs so powerful that they seemed made of steel, so intelligent that they read the movement of the opponent before it even happened. But there was something else. Something no one could explain. Corvino's pitbulls were not just winners, they were alive legends. Every fight overdue, every accurate bite, carried a mystery. How did a simple man from Chicago create the most feared lineage in the world? What secrets did he hide on his small property? What was in these dogs that made them invincible? This is not just the story of Joe Corvino, the creator. It is the story of a man who challenged the laws of nature and created something the world would never forget. A legacy of glory, blood and questions that may never have an answer. Today we will know a little about Joe Corvino. This is being written for you who are new. Which are starting with Pitbull, those that the phone bill is higher than the food itself. Just for you to know more, from a pioneer of the dog struggle. Before you start. For those who don't know yet, no one was closer to Joe Corvino than me. I feel that I gained the right to express my feeling and respect about Joe Corvino. In relation to the masters of fighting dogs. Joe was a hard-working man and was always self-taught. He was always 20 years ahead. He was a difficult man to please, and was always looking for ways to improve. This with anything he was involved, whether in horseshoes, mats or just the things of life, he would do his best. Joe's profession was a blacksmith. He had his store right in the heart of Chicago. Of all dozens of stores that were in Chicago, his store was the last of Ferraria in operation. As a blacksmith, Joe surpassed all the blacksmiths in the region. I lived 2 blocks from his store. At 9, I won my first dog. Who gave me was my uncle, who was very friendly of Joe Corvino. This is how I met Lord Joe Corvino. I don't know why, but he liked me. And from that day on, we stayed together, until the last day of life. As soon as my class was over, I ran to Joe's store. I was always scared on the way, because I had some bees, near Joe's store. Then he opened the store door, and walked toward the back. I saw people like nothing less than, Dogman Bert Klaus, Dogman Mike Ferris, Dogman Bill Cotton, Dogman Pete Sparks, Dogman Leo Kennard, Dogman Jack and Vic Kelly. I saw many high-class dogmens in the world of Pitbulls fight. All of them made a point of visiting Chicago. They always stopped to see Joe, and no matter how long Joe was. Its mailbox was always full of letters, combat professionals and newcomers as well. I have never lost a day of visit, so it began, the greatest experience of my life. Joe always took me with him, and we usually went a day before. To get before anyone, and so you can see them arrive. He said. Sonny, his first lesson. The only time a dogman tells the truth, is when he calls the other dogmen a liar. So Joe continued to tell me. Sonny, the papers do not do the dogs, it is the dogs that make the papers. He also said to me many times. Never be surprised when a dog gives up, surprise yourself when they stay. When Joe said these things to me, he paused and said. You understood? Or is that very deep to you? One day I asked him, what was the fight style, what did he prefer in a dog? And he answered. A dog biting his head. And I asked more why. And he answered like this. Because the dog is going, where the opponent's weapons are. I spent many hours in that Ferraria, and it was worth every minute, which I was there. Joe met the fighting of dogs, because in its time, the combat was considered a sport. If Joe were among us, I'm sure, his pipe would be lit, for him to watch some of today's dogs. People who bought Joe dogs were always satisfied. You could buy a Joe dog for $5, and install the rest paying $3 a week. He had a notebook and every time he received a payment, he wrote down in the book. One thing Joe told me, which is still in my head today. Sonny, desire merit for producing the dogs, which I like. And that surely, I took them from someone else, and will pass to someone too. They just don't fall from a tree. No one holds the monopoly of good dogs, and I know. And every time I put dogs to fight, they were 2-hour or more fights. The knees of my pants were already spent, and I had no voice. But winning or losing, their heads were always in the right direction. The type of dog that exists today, when I was active, you saw only once in a while. But now everyone has a punisher, and I'm worried about the people starting. They will really have a lot of work ahead. Joe never claimed to be the best, she said she was her dog's companion. But your dogs, like your treadmills. To this day, they remain intact, and still work. How many out there can say that your lineage will still be sought, 20-5 years after your fight? The large varieties of dogs today. And it doesn't matter what salespeople want you to believe. They are descendants of the great varieties of dogs of the past. Corvino dogs survived their own generation. An important thing about Corvino dogs, and that Joe has always stated, is that they take a long time to mature. And that if you get a good dog, be patient. They reach the peak at 3 years or more. He also highlighted the conditioning and told me, never put the dog to fight, just to do something. I was close to Joe more than anyone in your life. This is because it allowed it. Joe was 73 years old when he died, and still kept dogs until his death. I still have all your old cards and photos. And one day I can simply put them in a book. But do you know what most marked me? It was not the invincible dogs, nor the lessons on fighting or the famous dogmen coming to Chicago. What was with me was Joe's dedication. He did nothing in half. Every treadmill he built, every dog he trained, every advice he gave. Everything was done with a purpose, with passion. He knew that to create something lasting, he needed to put his heart, and that's what he did. Joe taught me something that goes beyond dogs, the value of hard work, patience and respect. He knew that no dogs, however good it was worth more than the character of the man who created him. This is what I want to pass to you. Create with purpose, train with respect, and remember that the true legacy is not just what you leave for the world, but on the impact you have on the people around you. What about Corvino dogs? They continue around, generation after generation, remembering all of us that Joe was not just a creator. He was a pioneer. And I'm sure, wherever he is now, he is smiling, with the pipe lit, seeing what each of you will do from today.